our free and equal segment tonight. If you're sending your young children to public schools, there's a good chance they're being exposed to transgender propaganda. And for parents in the state of Minnesota, they'll have no choice to opt their children out of this. St. Paul's Nova Classical Academy will, and I quote here, not adopt any gender policy that allows parents to opt out of the requirements in the gender inclusion policy because of objections based on religion or conscience. Unbelievable. With me now from the Federalist, Joy Pullmann. Joy, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Joy, first of all, your article on the Federalist regarding this particular school, St. Paul's Nova Classical Academy, it was excellent. I encourage our viewers to go read it. I do want to give a little background on this before we break it down because it's an incredible story. This is the story of St. Paul's Nova Classical Academy. Take a look.
David and Hannah Edwards enrolled their child at Nova in 2015, thinking the 5-year-old boy, who now identifies as a girl, would learn and thrive. Instead, they allege the school violated their child's rights by not protecting against gender-based bullying and hostility. Their story went public soon after.
We know from what he has shown us so far that we're going to need some protections in place to keep him safe while he's at public school.
The family said staff tried helping, but their actions were blocked by school leadership. So earlier this summer, the school was served a 2-count discrimination lawsuit demanding change.
They, in some ways, had no choice.
Gender justice attorney Lisa Stratton represented the family and recently won a settlement outside of court. It holds the school to transgender policy changes, staff training, and gender-neutral student uniforms.
Those things are not small. That kind of awareness creates a welcoming environment, and we're really excited that that's going to be happening at Nova.
In addition, Nova will pay $120,000 in damages to the Edwards. Nova attorney Laura Booth calls it a fair settlement to all parties.
Okay, Joy, it's kind of hard to know even where to start on this story, but let's start with the idea that in this settlement, as part of this settlement, parents are not allowed to opt their children, as young as kindergartners, by the way, out of this transgender training, sensitivity training. That is unbelievable to me.
Absolutely right. I mean, and that's not only at the specific charter school, but Minnesota is just about to adopt that similar policy statewide. And we're seeing this not only in Minnesota, but in state school boards across the nation, where sex ed policies are basically becoming, transgender indoctrination policies. And parents will show up, by the droves, protesting, objecting. And you're right, they're starting with children who are 5 years old, sometimes preschoolers. And parents are, basically being shut down and their voices are not heard, even when they bring expert evidence talking about the damages that this does to children.
Right. Isn't this a violation, I guess, of our Constitution, but isn't this a violation of religious liberty? If you have a policy that says, no, you're not allowed to opt out of this, even if you object to it religiously, even if you object to it, even if your conscience objects to it, how can a public school, taxpayer funded, your money and my money, how can a public school deny parents that?
Well, there's been a lot of case law going on now for years that really limits the rights of parents to have a lot of influence on their own children's upbringing, as well as what public schools are required to teach children. So right now, we really have an education system that assumes that it is more important than the parents. It is more primary than the parents in directing what kids are going to learn. So activists of all kinds have learned that if they target, the right education body, the State Board of Education or the state legislature, they only have to get a handful of people to agree with them, and they get to impose their agenda on all the rest of us. But I actually don't think this is really a religious liberty issue. It is objective truth that male and female are separate sexes. It's not a religious fact. It's a scientific fact. It's an objective fact. Of course, a lot of the world's major religions base a lot of their teachings on that fact of reality, but it transcends religion. It's just an objective fact about the world.
Right. It certainly transcends religion. I agree with you, but at the same time, the idea of tolerance here, that liberals are being so intolerant, I can allow them to think what they want as long as they don't impose it on someone else, and that's where it bothers me here. Also, I think the idea that they're calling this discrimination is ridiculous, because discrimination is based off of something, a characteristic that you can't help, not a behavior. This is a behavior. Yeah. These people want to behave in a certain way. They want to be held to different standards than other students. That's not discrimination. That's just routine.
Right. What they're basically trying to do is play on America's, reversal of racism, addressing of that racism, trying to say, like you're saying, the biological reality that does imply differences, like boys and girls have different body parts, that's not the same as the differences between races that don't affect, our interactions, So I mean, it's just they're basically trying to take that thing that Americans care about really deeply and that we fought really hard to provide equality to Americans, and they're using it as a cover to essentially abuse young people.
Right, you're absolutely right. And then when it comes to the issue of transgenderism, and I know this is controversial in a sense, but there haven't been any studies, to my knowledge, that show that, you know, a surgical transition from one gender to another actually helps with the mental gender dysphoria. There's no evidence whatsoever that that actually fixes the problem. And I don't think that they're not teaching children this in school when they're teaching them that they can choose which gender they want to be.
And that's actually, well, not only is there not no evidence, but the evidence that we have is it doesn't support the trans activist agenda. I mean, lots and lots of people, after they undergo a sex change operation, after they take the hormones, the underlying mental, the mental impairments that are leading to the desire to try to look like the opposite sex, those remain. And so that accounts for a lot of the high suicide rate and so forth. I mean, but the other thing that we have here is we're talking about little children. I mean, where this is very destabilizing to a child's sense of identity. When they're little, it's very important to help children understand what being a boy, what being a girl means, what it implies about the way, you're going to be a mommy or a daddy. There's different things about, if you're a girl, wow, that the way that people look at you is, different, and it affects how you ought to behave to protect yourself. So on and so, I mean, so there are things about the sexes that are really important to teach kids, and it's really being muddled and destabilizing. I mean, in fact, I wrote a piece today talking about a school in California. Parents were not warned about their kids being, they had another kindergarten student come in and do a gender reveal where the little boy changed into girl clothes during class, and the teacher was reading transgender picture books to the kids. A parent, comes to the school board meeting and says, my little girl came home crying and shaking because she was afraid that she might turn into a boy. So you're doing that to a 5-year-old little person. It's wrong. It's wrong to do that to children. Little boys can't become little girls, and telling them that really messes with them.
Right. It seems to me that it almost borderlines on child abuse for parents to enable a 5-year-old, a tiny little 5-year-old. I mean, these 5-year-olds, these are tiny children that should still think that babies are brought by storks. They shouldn't even be taught about sex and gender and sexuality and all that stuff for years to come.